Welcome to 2024, everybody. It's Peter Armaly again, Vice President of Customer Success at ESG. This is our first webinar of the new year, and I welcome you to this. I really appreciate you, skipping with us the last time. So and coming back this time. So again, this is ESG's Customer Success Unlocked webinar series that you've joined. And today, I just need to kind of cover a couple things around housekeeping. So if you've not participated before, we encourage you to, in the chat, let us know where you're signing in from. Really like to see where those are, where you're located in the world, and we'd like to say hi to you. If you have questions during the webinar, by all means, fire them into the Q&A panel, and we will endeavor to look at those as quickly as possible. And if they're relevant to the particular subject that we're talking about, I will bring those in and ask them instead of waiting till the end. So I see a lot of people chiming in for where they're from. Really appreciate that. ESG, let me just cover quickly what we do and who we are. We are a customer success as a service company. That's our trademarked phrase. And we're very proud of this. We focus completely on helping companies build, operationalize, and transform their customer success practices. We've been in business about 7 or 8 years in this space, and we continually kind of refine our service catalog, and we encourage you to check out our website and see what that looks like. So I have two guests today, and I just want to kind of quickly introduce them. The first person is Tim Cruz. Tim is the VP of Customer Success at Addigy. It's a company whose mission is to elevate the Apple IT ecosystem by providing the industry's first full-stack, cloud-based management platform. He's worked for Addigy for about 4.5 years, in the VP role for about half that, I think. He comes equipped with a solid background in technology, serving in roles that span project management, support engineering, solution consulting. It always seems to have an intense focus on looking for opportunities to leverage his expertise with automation and agile software development practices to bolster efficiencies and productivity. That background is absolutely perfect for this conversation today. Tim lives in Miami, where he's enjoying plus 80-degree temperatures. I'm sure almost all of you are not, except I see someone from Kenya. So maybe that person is also sharing the same kind of warmth. Tim, thank you and welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
Turning to my other guest, Justin Garlock is a senior customer success analyst and is one of my colleagues here at ESG. He's been with the company for about 8.5 years. And prior to that, he worked for a number of brands the audience will be familiar with: HPE, Infobox, VMware, and UPS. Justin works with ESG clients who require the company's help in developing or refining their data strategies for customer success, or when they need help with specific projects such as analyzing churn and retention and developing sophisticated health scoring mechanisms. Justin resides in Northern Kentucky, and I want to say to him, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Peter. Happy to be here.
Good. The title of today's webinar is Customer Health Scores. Diss them if you want, but they're a critical component of a data-driven CS practice. And if you do not read irritation in that title, I have failed in that messaging because I'm a little irritated. What I see in the industry and a lot of communication on LinkedIn when people bring up the idea of health scores. So the idea for this webinar came from two things. I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn. I was our company's chief evangelist, and I was a promoter in the CS community of what I like to believe are best practices. Over a number of years, I've observed and I've been in conversations with people, including senior executives, who are so over health scores because they argue or they hear that health scores are ineffective, that they're prone to error and misinterpretation, that they're inherently dangerous because they delude CSMs into thinking all is okay with their accounts when the truth could be something else. They insist that health scores are difficult to build for accuracy and to maintain with precision, and they conclude that health scores never deliver on what they're meant to, which is predict churn. During our conversation, we will be elaborating on why we feel those opinions are probably a result of some people having never seen a health score that worked, that they're missing the point of health scores. It's not about predicting churn. And in the end, they are making declarations for an entire community based on personal opinion. The other reason I wanted to have this as a topic for the webinar is because I've been watching these two guys right here collaborate for a number of months on the creation of a health score that absolutely hums. So let's get going. And I'm going to structure this webinar different than the previous ones. I'm structuring around the famous kind of 5 W's, which is who, what, when, where, why. But I'm changing it up just to kind of, I don't know why, I just felt like changing it up. So I'm changing the order of what, why, who, where, when, and at the end, I'll throw in a how. So let's start with the what. Describe for us, and let's start with you, Justin. Describe for us your definition of a health score. What's its strategic purpose in your mind? And what kind of categories of inputs and variables should the algorithm be comprised of? And finally, what's the outcome or output that people should expect from the health score process?
Okay, so at a very basic level, a health score is analyzing your customer's behavior to identify any relationships that exist in the data that can then be used to predict the probability of an outcome. What that outcome is totally dependent on what you're measuring, what your hypothesis is. It could be retention, it could be churn, it could be expansion, propensity to buy. All of that comes out in the defining phase. I purposefully never answer the question what kind of input should be in the algorithm, because that answer is a result of the analysis. I will answer what you should look at in your data. And honestly, it's much more simple than I think we like to overcomplicate it a lot. It's your customers' behavior. How are your customers interacting with your product? How are your customers using certain features? How does timing play into the usage of certain features from different milestones in their customer journey? So I never assume that an input is going to be there just because it's a great operational metric or a team metric that we have. You have to prove the correlation first. And I didn't plan on getting into it this early, but correlation, please stop using it as a filler noun. Prove that you have a p-value before you say correlation, because that's what a correlation is. Basically, customer health scores, it's not the same as a operational or a team metric. We're talking about behavior. Should you measure things like how often your CSMs engage with your customers, things like, anything that's more of a team metric, like engagement with CSMs? Are they having their QBRs, or did the customer miss a QBR? Of course, you should measure those things as a team, but it's different if it doesn't significantly contribute to the outcome that you're looking for as an organization.
That's awesome. Really good. I like the focus on starting with the outcomes. What does the customer kind of need, essentially? Tim, what are your thoughts on this definition from your point of view? And this first question is really meant to be strategic because we want to start high and then kind of dive in later.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, similar to what Justin said, proactive tool that can give you insights on the probability of retention, churn, or expansion, right? But the foundation of that is, what are your customers trying to achieve? What is their outcome? And what's the data that's there that you're collecting that can lead to that you've seen predictability that if they do A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, will likely get to them that outcome. And that's really what we're using health scores as, right? Like we've spoken to our customers. We're identifying what they're trying to accomplish. We're seeing predictable behaviors that if most customers in this segment do 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, or whatever the case may be, and it could be any behavior. It's not just product adoption behaviors. It's buying or procurement behaviors. It's how often they want to talk to you, right? That's another behavior in it as well, right? That you can look at, so that you can see at a high level snapshot that this is the health of the customer and really the predictability of retention or churn or expansion based off of those conversations or behaviors that we're seeing them do.
Okay. So neither of you kind of touched on the second question. I don't blame you because I asked like 3 questions there. But the categories, I know Justin, you said you don't really want to talk about the variables, but are there kind of buckets that are generally kind of like true for most health scores?
Yeah, I'll answer that with this is what you should analyze, not what should be included in your health score. This
Yeah.
is what you should look at when building the model. So things like customer behavior, that's very broad, but we're basically talking about usage data of the product, timing data. Another big one is support. So we've looked at things like average days a ticket stays open, how many tickets have they opened over the life cycle, even more specific within of the life cycle by segment, how many tickets are being opened by a specific customer. Other things are things like surveying. So what kind of surveying exists? Surveying data, that's a big one. And then any kind of customer feedback data. Basically, any current data that your company is collecting, whether or not it's directly tied to customer behavior or not, is worth taking a look at, because you really can't eliminate the noise from the signals until you actually run the analysis to determine what the signals are.
Tim, thoughts on that? I have another kind of like comment, but I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, even so I'll double click on what Justin mentioned about support, because even like in our analysis that we worked on together, two different segmentations. One really wants to talk to support, and that was a strong indicator of retention, and the other one wants to talk to them only when it's needed, and then wants short, levels of SLA times, right? And even understanding that there's buckets, understanding your customers' segmentations and your ICP, and really making sure that you could see two different correlations there if you really are servicing two distinct segmentations, to make sure that maybe you need to have two different health scores. And that's one of the things that I'll mention, that as it relates to variables, it's good to have the buckets, but know that the buckets isn't just one whole thing that you're going to apply to all your customers. It is plausible, depending on your business model or who you're servicing, that you might need to segment out your health score, have similar but distinct health scores for customer segmentations that you're working in.
And
Yeah,
I was just going to say, is it fair to say that everything in the health score should be quantitative versus qualitative, or what are your thoughts on qualitative?
Justin or me first?
Well, that's a good question.
if you open it to me, we could be on this topic for a while.
Okay, Tim, then you.
Okay, no, it's so quantitative is better, but it's a balance. I think like it has to be qualitative. Your CSMs, you as the leader, your CSMs, whoever needs to have those conversations, and you need to capture qualitative metrics from your customers, hands down, full stop there. But then it's healthy to have a good conversation internally or with others to identify, well, how do we convert that to something we can quantify? And I think that is healthy in itself, because as you scale your organization, as you go from servicing maybe hundreds of customers to thousands or tens of thousands of customers, it's hard to quantify qualitative metrics. But getting into the motion of how we can do that, so we can we can still continue to have the motion of a health score, is a very healthy motion to have.
I like how you positioned the customer's kind of voice there and the employee's voice. So Justin, you and I have had lots of conversations around subjectivity and objectivity. Kind of any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I tell clients all the time, the qualitative data should point us where to look in the quantitative data. It's great indicators capturing from customers where they are, but I still keep coming to this. When I think of something like customer sentiment, for example, a CSM's gut feel. I'll have a little rant about gut feel later that stay tuned for. But gut feel of the CSM, not necessarily a bad thing. They're boots on the ground. They're talking to the customers every week, every day in some cases for high touch. And that's not necessarily a false indicator, but it's not a predictor until we prove it. So should it be included in the analysis? Absolutely. Have I included it in an analysis for clients? Absolutely. Results differ across the board. And how do you explain that? Like you can't explain gut feel quantitatively. So
okay, you've both done a nice job of making that case of, yes, include qualitative, but endeavor to try and make it quantitative at some point in the process. Okay, so let's move on to the why. So And I'm thinking not that they would ever think of it explicitly, but help us understand anyway why it should matter to a company's C-level executives that a CS organization employs a health scoring mechanism. Does it make sense maybe that one or two of the C-level executives would care more than the others? So it's kind of a compound question there. Tim, why don't we go with you first?
Yeah, so try, if it's in its best state for your organization, get it to a point where it can be, it's not the ultimate reason, but can be a forecasting tool. And being able to go to the executive team or be a part of those executive conversations and have good understanding opportunities for the organization based off of what the health scores might be showing, especially if you got into a motion of really good retention, understanding retention across the board, and then getting to a really cool state as well, which is trying to predict expansion, right? So you're able to expose opportunities around that at a high level. But then also expose risk as well. Like, what are areas of risk in the business where we need to double down a little bit more in marketing as it relates to this particular business behavior that's coming out of the health score, or our CS team needs to be enabled better on how to talk about this portion, whatever the case may be, right? But being able to see at a high level risks and opportunities. And if done right, I think this is like one of the many holy grails in customer success as you try to get to this point. It can even be a leading indicator for NRRGR as well. Like, that's something that, at least from the Addigy side of things, but I think it could be applied to many other organizations out there, that our CRO is going to be very interested in, our CFO, our Chief Customer Officer, whoever owns head of customer success as well. I think those are the executives at a high level that are going to be really interested in seeing something like this and keeping it within a reasonable margin of error as well, as it relates to looking at a high level view of our customer base.
Before I ask Justin for his thoughts on that, in your experience, does that, I'm going to say trust, from them in the health score, does that take time to develop?
I think it does. I think if we came in, or if I would apply this in any organization. So this is not just an Addigy thing. So put me into another spot. I'll still share these thoughts. I think if I came into a new organization and I implemented a health score day one, they might be distrusted on it, or they just might not have that trust built up. That's a better way of saying it. They might have the trust built up. But if you see a consistent motion of basic fundamental customer success things overall that leads to the health score being built, then that trust will be there pretty instantaneously. Because that's really goes back to my previous answer on what is a health score. A health score is really just a snapshot, and it's really just showing, are we doing the fundamentals overall in customer success, that it's just being reported in a very easy to understand way, maybe green, yellow, red, or percentage, or whatever your output is for a health score. So I think, yes, the answer to your question is yes, that trust can be built quickly. But it's based off of what are the past things that you're doing as a motion of customer success overall, the fundamental things you should be doing that lead to that trust in the health score overall.
Perfect. Justin, what are your thoughts on the C-level audience?
So I think we have a really big opportunity, specifically as CS, and even more so within CS Ops, to target a specific C-level person. And before I reveal who that is, I want to talk about Daniel Kahneman for a second, because if you haven't heard of Daniel Kahneman, give him a Google. I won't spoil the book I'll recommend, but at the end, but it is by Daniel Kahneman. And something he talks about in this book that we'll talk about later is that was done, where basically the more senior level or experienced the person, the more reliant they are on gut feel. Basically, they know, but they don't know why. And so he talks about what's called objective ignorance. And basically, what objective ignorance is it's the largest source of bias and noise is not the limit of how good those predictions based on gut feel are, but the limitations on how good they can be or could be. So it's that threshold of you're only going to get to here when, again, if you look more quantitatively, you could get here. If you remove the noise, remove the bias, that limit, that threshold becomes a little stronger. And so I think we have a really big opportunity with CROs and CFOs specifically. I know from personal experience when I've presented to C-level and a CFO or a CRO is on the call, they're the first ears to perk up. Why? They're more analytical minded. They're more likely to remove that noise from their mind and be led by the numbers. And then once you have that buy-in from that persona, it's a lot easier than to I don't think you're going to necessarily convince the C-level to stop listening to their gut, because it's human nature. It's this natural reward system that we have that our brains enable. But I think it helps a little bit. And the thing that I've seen when it comes to building this trust, building this trust really with health scores, that with folks who aren't analytical minded on C-level, that are more gut feel, comes to proving or disproving. So something that I like to do, not necessarily with C-level, but with director level, VP level, I like running my analysis, going away, doing the things, coming back of customers with absolutely no context. And we just talk about those specific customers. And then at the end, I reveal, Tim's nodding because I did this with him a couple of times. I reveal, like, are those poor health? Are those poor probability to retain? Are they high propensity to expand? And it's amazing how those conversations go sometimes, because this gut feel that they had no context over, they were just from their gut, from their mind, from their own limited threshold of knowledge, telling me that this customer was actually going to retain and grow like crazy when the model suggests otherwise, or vice versa. And so they have this kind of moment of, oh, okay, now let's see what actually happens. And that's an interesting, I mean, there's a test we can do to prove how accurate they think they are, right? It's a simple 2x2 chi-squared. Like, we run those all day. And so I think again, to reiterate, the CRO, CFO, that's our target. If we're CS ops, if we're analysts, if we're VPs of CS that are looking to build trust in health scores. And then once we get there, it's all about proving and disproving and iterating.
Yeah, I'll just add my very quick kind of experience or example. I've had a lot of experience with health scores, but when I was at Oracle, I was invited to be part of a full day kind of account territory review, basically, and all the account executives had to speak about their portfolio, and I was invited, the only customer success representative, to speak about a topic. I think my VP inserted it into the agenda on health scores, and nobody knew what they were. So I had to explain them, and there was a lot of like hostility in the room to this idea that a post-sales person would talk about scoring the health of their customers, their accounts. And the only person who really kind of helped defend me was the CRO, because I think, to your point, Justin, they were abstracted from the defensive posture of owning an account. They looked at the territory and felt, okay, it's data. So anyways, I think that's a really good point you made around people, certain individuals, certain roles are probably more inclined to look at, be more receptive to data than emotion, you know. So let's move on to the who question. So who are the key players who should be involved in the creation and maintenance of the health score? And what skills are required for this creation and maintenance? Are the skills the same for both creation and maintenance? And, you know, Justin, I kind of was thinking about you when I wrote this question. So let's start with Tim then. So who are the key players who should be involved?
So I'll say this: too much information is no information. It's a phrase that I've kept in my mind for well over a decade at this point. So for us, the way I translated this was, well, too many people is too much. So keeping like a strategic team to come together and talk about it is key, and I'll get a little bit into that soon. And then also getting the right data points as well, because we have hundreds of data points, but if you look at a health score, it's get whittled down to 6, and short and sweet and to the point is better than an overcomplicated system. So when it comes to the key players, obviously whoever's running customer success is one of those key players. A CS analyst or an operations person, but also having buy-in and strategic talks with whoever owns product management, engineering, and also marketing. right? Like being able to sit down and potentially sales, if it's a revenue motion, which one person owns sales and marketing, but to be able to have like it's succinct people to come in and they're supposed to know the market, they're supposed to know how product usage is, they're supposed to know our customers, and getting them together in the room to kind of sit down and come up with some theories, right? Like all of us, even coming to our marketing teams, right? Like we go out and talk to our customers. We have that as a constant motion at Addigy. But so with that information and having that gut feeling, as we've been kind of talking about here, we come up with some theories. Those theories turn into theses, and those theses turn into, well, let's prove it. And that kind of goes back to what Justin was saying so eloquently about like having the data share a story, have the data tell a particular thing. Well, we want to have people that come in that know the customer, that know the market, that know buying behaviors, that know product usage, come up with some really good theories so that way it can lead to a better health score. That's really what it points out to. And proving it, right? We just don't want to put something out there and just say, yes, it's working as is. No, it needs to be proven. And that goes back to the 2x2 that Justin was alluding to as well.
You said a word that I thought of in your answers, both of you, in previous questions, and that's the word story. I think that's an excellent kind of way to think about the health score creation process. Essentially, you're trying to tell a story, and not a fiction story, but a nonfiction story that's going to be really factual and truthful. But in the end, you want to communicate to an audience something important, and you want it to be in a compelling way. Justin, what are your thoughts on the key players and skills and that sort of thing?
Yeah, a couple of things to caveat this with. I think we need to level set that this is a living, breathing process. This is not something that is done and implemented, and you can say you have a predictive health score now. So if we all agree with that, there are really two key areas that I think are really important. There's the tactical, so the analyst, the person actually doing the math, running the analysis, getting all of the data ready, doing the thing. But then there's the like VP advocate level. So when I think about Tim over at Addigy, one of the things that became very clear when I started working with him was his focus that he had put into getting their data foundations in a place that enabled us to get to where we were today, to where we are today. And I think it's often overlooked. People want the shiny predictive model, like make it as predictive as possible. But oftentimes I find myself in scenarios where I spend more time modeling or mapping or creating data structures to support the enablement of predictive analytics. It's such a critical foundation piece. And I think from a tactical level, I think if there's any tactical people out there, I'm sure your mouth is dry from complaining about this, and the data is just not where it is, and you can't fix it on your own. You need that person to advocate for cross-org telemetry, basically, like Tim. And so with those two key players in place, there's the role of Tim's connecting the orgs, Tim's leading the strategy, and then there's the analyst that's actually the doing. And the skill set there is really critical because I think, Peter, the way that you opened this webinar talking about, we see a lot of negativity around health scores. I honestly don't think it is because people understand and disagree. I genuinely think it's a lack of understanding of the how. I joke around internally at ESG with my colleagues to steps to create a health score. Step 1, learn math. Step 2, there is no step 2. Like it's all about the math. And that technical skill set is very, very important. That mathematical skill set is very important. But my strongest skill as an analyst doesn't come in any of the math. The math is 1 is always going to equal 2, right? My strongest suit comes from always asking why, always digging into why are we doing it this way? Why are we collecting this data point? Why aren't we collecting that data point? And oftentimes, as we're running these tests, as we're executing on the technical skill set that we have, the biggest piece of advice when it comes to the skill set and the trying to squeeze in the qualitative aspect of it is we don't create we don't create predictive models and then try to squeeze in, oh, but I also want to measure this operational team metric that I'm getting asked to report on. So we're going to count this in as health. You're skewing the entire mathematical model.
Okay.
And that, again, comes back to just a lack of understanding of the basic mathematical principles that go into this.
Yeah, thanks for all that kind of explanation. I 100% agree with you. And I think if I were to capture kind of the way you approach it in another word is curiosity. And I think that's a skill in itself that people need to exercise. And if you don't have curiosity about information and data and a curiosity ultimately about the customers, then you're probably not going to succeed in this role of creating health scores, because it's all about trying to unlock secrets that need to be revealed about their health, right?
And I'll add, if you don't mind, Peter, like
Sure.
it's a partnership too. Like, but what worked with Justin and I on like multiple health scores that we created for Addigy is me coming up with some stories, like since you like that word, some theories on it, and then him proving or disproving it. And I'll be transparent and honest. There was some that he disproved, and that was awesome. And it was like, well, that does not what the data shows. It's like, okay, don't put that in the health score, right?
Be truthful. Was it really awesome, or was it
it was no, it was awesome. The irritating part was like, I was wrong, but it's okay. But like that's part of the learning experience, right? And that's part of knowing that the health score is not always going to be a set it and forget it thing. You know, like one of the motions we're going to have at Addigy is looking at the model at least once or twice a year. Because guess what? Markets change, customer change, behavior change, new product comes out, right? That might dictate things. And that's something that we definitely need to make sure that is a motion that we're challenging and testing, because guess what? The story will change, and that's okay. And the health score should follow the correct story. You might come in with many theories and theses, but the data is only going to point in the right direction. And I think that's what helps a lot in this. And having a clear partner like Justin, for example, a CS analyst, to balance the theories and thesis to what the math is saying is the perfect partnership as it relates to a healthy health scoring. And that's why I think, going back to conversations we've had in the past, Peter, there are people on LinkedIn and others saying health scores don't work. Well, because they don't have the right foundation to support a healthy health score.
Yeah, agreed. And let me just quickly do something kind of funny here. We don't have advertising here on Customer Success Unlocked webinars, but I'm going to advertise, just very briefly. What Justin did with you, Tim, is something we instill in our employees is to build trust and to really challenge clients to produce better outcomes in the end. He could have easily just gone with what you wanted to do, right? But ESG, our brand, is all about, it's our people and it's our IP, it's our expertise. And so that's it. That's the advertising that Justin kind of exhibited in that, working with you. Justin, you were going to say?
Yeah, those exact scenarios that Tim described, where it's I think this, we'll talk it out logically. It makes so much sense. And to be frank, it would be so much easier to just say, yep, Tim, you're right. Let's do that. But in those scenarios, and we get results back from the actual math, it often leads us to not a specific dimension of data, but potential dimensions of data issues. So in things where the math isn't mathing correctly, or it isn't quite logical, and we actually... I saw Ed's on the webinar. Shout out to Ed. He loves this peel of the onion back a little bit, right?
Ed Powers, everybody.
Ed Powers, yeah, shout out. We learned that, actually that data point is doing something a little funky. So we need to either remove it from the analysis or figure it out and fix the data. And that happens so much. These results aren't, even when we're done, we still have to be curious, because some of the stuff could, we're human. Mistakes are made. As connected and as connected as our data can be, there can still be mistakes that don't show themselves until that part of the analysis.
So we can probably circle back at this time at the end, but it feels like we're actually kind of on borderline terrifying people at the same time as inspiring them. So let's move on to the next question. So where organizationally, and this is not a trick question, where organizationally does the responsibility for health score mechanism creation and maintenance fit best? So let's go with you, Tim.
CS operations team.
Okay.
It's okay if they have an analyst on that team, that's fine, but a person who owns, or the team who owns operations for customer success, it should live there. Whoever is running head of customer success should definitely prioritize it and be strategic with them as well. So it's not just you go figure it out and then just come report back to me. It's a constant conversation. But the one who ultimately makes sure the score is implemented correctly, who's working with data analysts to make sure that it's the right model and is going to test it once or twice a year, at least in the cadence that we do it, is going to be CS operations.
Justin, additional thoughts?
Totally agree. The only thing I would add, I think we see this a lot where CS ops comes in and we're almost stuck in this middle of like creating data structure and connecting data for the first time in orgs in some scenarios. And I honestly, that thought has driven me crazy for a few years and trying to create a theory as to why this is. And I think it's simple. I think we're the first org that's trying to bring in all facets of data where the customer is interacting with our organization and see how that's impacting the customer.
Yeah.
And so we have to lead that charge of bringing in all of that data ultimately to enable things like health scores to enable outcomes for our customers.
Yeah, that's an excellent way to characterize it. Now, and part of my motivation for asking that question is because I've worked with tons of customers or companies, I would say, in various kind of capacity and different roles. And I've encountered people who've kind of outsourced the health score creation and maintenance to a development team or something like that, some sort of non-customer success entity. I've tried to persuade them that's not a great idea, in terms of just even SLAs. But I think you need to have the expertise in your organization, because you just commented, Justin, around customer success's mission is really to understand the customer and all the data that surrounds them and how to make them more successful. So that's really where that question was coming from. Thanks. That CS ops, is the obvious answer to that. So let's go to when now. And I'm trying to, audience, if you do have questions, pop those in to the chat or the Q&A, and we can look at those. And I'm trying to leave some time at the end in case you want to ask specific questions, but I've got a couple more. So let's go to when. When does it make sense to trust the health score and place more reliance on it as a trigger for even more action? So Justin, let's go with you to start.
Yeah, so there's a couple of thoughts I have here. And Tim kind of touched on it earlier. He talked about health scores that are tied to different outcomes. So as an example, we've built a health score that looks at probability of retention. So how likely are they to retain versus churn? And I think that's great. I think that's needed. It gives you something, but what then do you do with that, right? What do you do with that 60% probability to retain? Well, you can't really do anything on that. It's just based on the significant behaviors that are related and a probability at the end. So I think there's a level of accuracy, right? No model is 100% perfect. There's going to be outside biases that we don't even anticipate that could slip their way into our models. But I think when it comes to actually doing this test, my college professor would be so proud of me right now. Correlation does not equal causation, right? Like I think even in these tests that we run and we see p-value 0.000 and an R value that's 0.9 being a strong relationship, I think it could be easy to jump to conclusions and say, drive more of this exact behavior in this exact way by this exact amount to lead to this exact outcome. And that's kind of missing the purpose of the model. So instead, we do have the correlation direction, whether it's a negative correlation or a positive correlation. We know what direction the behavior is going in that leads to that intended outcome. And so I've seen some organizations actually build out. So they have the model that's implemented. They have the identified variables. They plug them into the predictive model, get a probability. get the expected outcome probability. But then when it comes to actioning for CSMs, they look at those specific behaviors and say, okay, let's look at these a little more individualized and see what direction the correlation is going in. How can we action our CSMs? I won't say what exactly the feature was, but I've worked with organizations where, all of the bells and whistles should be going off within every part of the company if this one feature wasn't enabled. Right? Because it's like this one thing is predictive in almost every single scenario, regardless of outcome we're looking at: churn, retention, expansion, propensity, like any of those outcomes, it's high. And so I think there are ways that we can action that isn't just simply throwing all of our eggs in the bucket and saying that this behavior is causing this outcome.
Okay. Yeah, it's complex, and I think you treated it appropriately. Tim, what are your thoughts on, when does it make sense to trust the health score more?
Trust or build, I guess. What are your thoughts? Maybe both?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say when it comes to trusting, it's when you're able to see consistency within like, a quarter, 2 or 3, or even a year, that health score is the correlation to whatever you're measuring is pretty sound within a healthy margin of failure. So if you're saying it's 80% accurate, but then over the course of the year, like there was a variance of like 2, 3, 4%, I think you can start trusting it, because no model is 100% accurate. If you find 100% accurate, you found the holy grail, but it's highly unlikely in the real world scenario. But I'll say this: when it comes to building a health score, don't feel like you need to do this as your first motion within customer success, especially if you're coming into a brand new company or you're starting to lead the charge from a customer success motion. It's probably the third or fourth thing that you should do. And I would definitely say that if you're going from a reactive motion to more of a proactive motion, that's probably the best time to start having a health score, because that health score is going to start becoming your North Star, so to speak. One of many, but one of the North Stars that you're going to be looking at for predictability within your customer success motions. That's the best time, in my opinion. And also, don't feel like it needs to be accurate first time around. I'll give you an experience share. When I was starting customer success within one organization, I did create a health score right off the bat, but we weren't ready for a health score right off the bat, and I knew that. So I created one to show to the executive team that this is eventually where we're going to go, and it's going to be more accurate. But we measured very basic things that I knew right off the bat, and I set the expectations right off the bat that there was going to be a level of accuracy, but maybe 60% or something like that. And we used in the model NPS scores, the amount of licenses they used, and if they were certified in our particular product, something basic like that. But the reason why I started early was just to get people familiarized that, look, this is not the North Star yet. Eventually, I'm going to lead you into it. It's going to be a North Star thing. But the best thing we need to focus on for customer success is things like starting to have customer success managers, doing onboardings, understanding the journey of the customer, things like that. We were very much in the reactive phase. But once we were starting to get into a motion of proactivity, that's when we took the old health scores, we deprecated them because we knew it was inaccurate, but made them more predictive because we had more data to look at. We had more gut feelings because we were talking to the customers. We had more things that we started to see predictabilities in the behaviors. And then that was then the right time to then start building a true health score, which was when we were starting going from more reactive model to more of a proactive model.
I love that, Tim. I think in your case, it's like a tool for transformation. Essentially, you're transforming the organization and bringing them along through educating them, instead of like hitting them over the head and saying you must do these things. You're actually educating them, and you're educating yourself in the process too, which is really great. I want to bring in a question from Sue Schneider because I think it's pertinent. She asks, how important is it to see the change in health score over time, both at the customer level, but at the aggregate of it? And she follows on and says it's important. If it is important, how do you do that if you're fine tuning the health score once or twice a year? And I think she's kind of struggling with or grappling with trust, essentially. If the health score is changing, when do you know if it's telling you the truth or not about customers or the aggregate of customers? Justin?
Yeah, two buckets. The first one is that more gut feel health score. So if you have a health score that's based on kind of what Tim described, where it's, we have NPS, so let's throw that in there. We want to drive engagement, so let's measure if a CSM is talking to the customer once a week, and I don't know how many tickets, because it's available data. And that's the model that is changing and is being iterated on. There's really no proof in that. And so how can you build the trust without the proof? And so I think the trust can come, and especially if we're in with that CRO, CFO level, when we're actually proving the model, when we're proving the model over time. Sorry, was that the same? Oh, I think I got a pop up. Yeah, go ahead.
Did you finish your thought?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. So Tim, any additional thoughts on kind of Sue's kind of like posing that question around?
Yeah, for us, when we start to see inaccuracies, it's a moment to attack, so to speak. And what I mean by that is, like, we ask our CSMs, or even us on the leadership level, reach out to those customers to see, hey, is this, we see a change. Is the outcome changing for you, or are you not achieving the outcome you originally were looking for? And we can get varying answers, meaning if the outcome hasn't changed for them, meaning if they've been, since day one they became a customer, they wanted to go left, and for whatever reason left is not working for them, but they still need to go left, then we talk to them, and then we bring that data back internally, and we try to say, okay, is the model inaccurate, or does it need to change, or is the model correct, but maybe we just need to go more tactical with the customer. Maybe they're just struggling to go down that path, even though it definitely does get them to their outcome as to what they need. Or it could be the other conversation, the other bucket, which is their outcomes have changed. The customer and what they originally needed, yes, they needed that at the moment as to why we earned their business, but now it's starting to shift because of market changes or because of business changes specifically to them. And if that happens, then we bring that back in. And it could be one of two things. Either if we're seeing a strong shift in the market, then maybe the health score needs to change broadly, or we kind of write that down and we kind of think about, we park it in a particular place because maybe, just maybe, another customer segment is starting to emerge that we need to start looking at closely. Mm-hmm. And so these should be conversations that or questions you should be asking yourself. Just because you see a change in the inaccuracy of the model doesn't necessarily mean the model is right or wrong. It should lead you to go back to having conversation with your customers, bring that back in those theories, let the data, prove, disprove, based off of what you're hearing, and then kind of go from there.
Okay.
I think.
Sorry, I want to keep moving, but go ahead quickly, Justin.
Yeah, really quickly. This is where we get into DMAIC. This is where we get into the control aspect of measuring change over time. There's a test that we can do to show if the actual model is still predictive or if it does need to be remodeled. And it's mostly in that control phase where we're testing it against either some cohort analysis or things like that, where we can see change over time happening as a result of this implementation of a customer health score.
Okay. So the final question before there's a couple more for the audience I want to get to, but the how. So tell us how CS professionals can know that their health score is working well. And I know this is you could probably go into a lot of detail here, but how do they know, and how would they know it's faulty? Let's start with you this time, Justin.
Sorry, one more time.
How can CS professionals know that their health score is working well, and how do they know if it's faulty?
I feel like this is going to unintentionally become my catchphrase, but there's a test for that, right? Like there are tests that we can do that prove the before and the after, the before implementation and the after implementation. But again, it's this living process, like Tim was alluding to earlier. Imagine you build a 95% accurate model. You have it implemented, things are going smooth. You've proven that it's predictive and sound. but then you've introduced a new product and you're not even looking at the data that's included in that product. That, I don't know, just off the top of my head, maybe some of those features either take away from usage of implemented previous features of your product, or changes the way that the product itself is used. So
Yeah.
this is where we go back to that iterate phase of, you have to continuously look at it as you're guided to answers in your own data, or where to look for more data.
Which goes back to the earlier comment about where should this be in an organization? It needs to be in a CS ops, full-time roles, people focused on this sort of information. Tim, any more thoughts on the how?
Yeah, if you're seeing consistently that the model of predictability is aligned with real world metrics, even with a small variance of error, right? Then to have trust in it, especially if the model was built based off of customer behaviors. Again, like let me go back to the story what I shared about my first iteration of a health score in one particular organization I worked in. It was NPS score, license usage, and if they were certified or not. Those are customer behaviors, yes, but those aren't customer behaviors that will clearly line back to the successful outcomes they're trying to achieve. Just because somebody is using all the licenses, just because someone is certified, just because they did a positive health score, because at that point in time they were really, really happy, perhaps, doesn't mean that they're going to not look for another solution, or they're going to stay. Like it could be either or. So if you have in your model predictable behaviors, and if the variance is not that far off from real world metrics that you're just getting from your financial data, right? Like, did the customers retain or not? If you're doing a health score based off of churn, and it's looking at 95% success rate and 5 left, okay, did you see that in the real world metrics? Oh, 7 left this month. Okay, begin trust in it, or a quarter or year, whatever the cadence is. Begin trust in it and just keep looking at it, keep testing on it, keep scrutinizing if it's really accurate or not. I think that's very healthy to do. This is not a set and forget it motion by any means, any stretch of the imagination.
Okay, that's really good emphasis. I want to bring in a question from the audience, and my friend Sherry asks, how do you see other teams, customer marketing, sales, product, positively adopting health score data? If resistance, what do you think is driving that? And I'm not sure if you either have experience there, but I'll go ahead and ask that. I mean, I have some, but Tim, go ahead.
We have a really cool story that I can share now. That we have actually 3 different health scores right now, with potentially more coming in the future. 2 out of the 3 measure retention as it relates to 2 customer segmentations that we have, and then a third one measures customer expansion. So in our minds, we feel like if we've earned the right for them to retain, which is health score number 1 for this particular segmentation, then we can look at the other health score, which is predictability of expansion. Have we earned the right for expansion? Then we can do something, right? Whatever the strategy is and the plan is in how we want to operate there. And the cool story I want to share is on that expansion piece. Like, we are able to isolate particular product behaviors that we realize, okay, for a segment of our customers, we've earned their right to retention, but they're not doing particular motions yet that will lead to expansions. Well, now we're talking to our customer marketing team to say, hey, what are some cool campaigns we can start doing in this particular behaviors and flows to really give some thought leadership around this for this segmentation, so that it can lead to potentially expansion. So that's something that we're actually doing now, and we want to measure it. So we're going to push out a marketing campaign. We took a snapshot of those cohorts that are particular red in one behavior that might be yellowish, just to kind of explain it simply, in their overall expansion score, but they're red in this particular one. We're kicking off a marketing campaign, and we're just going to measure it. We're going to test, like, did some turn into green based off the ones that we went out to and we started speaking to? Did they turn into green? If not, then we're going to get a little bit more tactical, and then we're going to tell the CSMs, go talk to them and see what we're missing. Did they like the collateral? Did they not? If they didn't like it, what would have they preferred? So it kind of gets into this cool motion where we're starting high level plan of attack and then narrowing it back down to the CSMs and actually boots to the ground. Let's get some really good feedback, that qualitative feedback from our customers, so we can bring it back and try something different to make them successful overall.
It's terrific. Justin, do you have awareness or knowledge of other clients, or maybe in your other kind of past that you've encountered other organizations adopting or using the health score data?
Yeah, I think there's two groups in this, at least these three teams that we're given. When we're talking about marketing or sales, I don't feel like you have to bore them with the math. If you lead with, hey, we found this predictive behavior, how can we drive a campaign for this to increase usage on this specific thing? And by the way, it's going to lead to this outcome. For sales guys or sales especially, that's all you need to say. It's go time. Product, I see an opportunity there. I feel like product is separated a lot, kind of in their own world, doing their own thing. I've recently seen many reels on Instagram talking about making fun of this and how product is just kind of their own team off to the side, isolating in a basement, the last to know about anything. And so I think when it comes to, awareness at the very least of the predictive behaviors, one of the things I really highly advocate for clients is this idea of like an operations council, like a data operations council. And that's basically a tactical person at the seat of the table from each of these teams. So like a sales ops person, a rev ops person, a CS ops person, a marketing person, and specifically product, because I think that's a great way to bring everybody together. And ultimately create that awareness that could lead to a difference in how data is being collected, even at the product level specifically.
Okay, great. And my comment on this would say, I'd say that my experience is sales, Sherry, sales was resistant to even believing it. But when you got them to believe it, they didn't want to do much with it, other than to see a health score as just another thing to kind of consider, which was not my ambition. I wanted them to actually have actions from the health score. But anyways, that's a long journey. But I found product and engineering much more receptive, and support was really receptive to the health score for sure. So I'm going to close, we're coming to the end, but I always close these webinars by asking each guest to recommend a book. It's become a very popular thing. Like I get a lot of feedback. So this is a nice part of the webinar, and I like it too. I like to hear what you guys come up with. And so it can be a book specifically about this subject, or it can be something that you can kind of explain how it's related to it. And so let's start with Tim.
7 Pillars of Customer Success, Wayne McCulloch. Really good book. There's a chapter in there about health score, and the best part of the book, in my opinion, is that he goes through what, from his perspective, is a proven framework if you follow it in this particular flow of things. And he doesn't start off with customer success as number 1. I think it's number 3 or 4, if I recall correctly from the read. But it is, he starts with the foundational things. And for me, I get into a motion of trying to read it like probably once a year or every other year. So I go back to my model of like, it's don't overcomplicate the simple. Try to keep it as simple as possible. And in customer success, we could get into the habit of sometimes overcomplicating the simple. So trying to narrow it down into what are the foundational things we are supposed to be doing in customer success makes me go back to simplicity, like the health score, like the other motions we're supposed to be doing overall. So highly recommend that book.
Cool. Yeah. Wayne's a good guy, by the way, everybody. Justin, what's your book?
Noise by Kahneman, co-authors of Siboney and Sunstein as well. Basically, it's about flaws in human judgment and how to eliminate noise and bias from signals just in general, but it's not customer success specific, but a lot of really good principles and thinking in there, a lot of the psychology behind it as well. So
yeah, when that book was released, I actually attended an event at the University of Toronto where the authors were there, and I got a copy of the book right here. So wonderful book. I know it's Ed Power's favorite book as well. So if Ed sanctions it, then you should go out and buy it.
That's who recommended it to me. So yeah.
So we're at the top of the hour, guys. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this. I knew this would be a great conversation, and you kept it at the right level. The audience, as you can tell, there's lots more you can learn. If you want to reach out to these two individuals, by all means, I think they would welcome the conversation. So until next time, thank you again for joining, and we'll look out for notice about another webinar in 4 weeks in February. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.